All right, we're here with gubernatorial candidate Curtis Hill, prior Attorney General of the state of Indiana. And if we could begin, maybe you could just kind of introduce yourself as far as your background and being here. You said, from what this says, your whole life, you're in Indiana, born and raised.
Yes, sir. I'm from Elkhart, born and raised in Elkhart, Indiana, the fifth child of my parents. I lived there my entire life, went to college at Indiana University, studied business marketing, got my degree there, went back to law school in Bloomington, got my JD degree, met my wife while I was in law school, Teresa. She was at IU as well. We got married years later. We've had 5 children that are now 29, 27, 25, 24, no, 23, 22. The 23 should be 24 next week.
Amen.
And they've all, we just suddenly shifted into the empty basket. The kids were all during the pandemic, all the kids were still close by, and now they've all kind of scattered.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going through that experience. Started practicing law in my hometown, Elkhart, back in 89, 90, as a part-time deputy prosecutor, and had my own private law practice. In 2002, I ran for prosecutor. I ran against a very popular chief deputy, but I ran on a platform of change. Elkhart was the largest county at the time when it was still part-time, and so I had a plan to enhance and create a full-time office and really put some focus on stopping crime, drug activity, and in particular crimes against children. That was one of my specialties as a deputy. Won the primary overwhelmingly with 20% of the vote. Won the general election with 78% of the vote. And so we had a mandate for change, and we created a very aggressive prosecutor's office that I was very proud of. We built that into a really a national model. I ran 4 times, got elected 4 times. I don't think I had an opponent after that first one. And then proceeded to run for Attorney General. I ran for Attorney General because I liked what we had done as prosecutor. I had done as much as I could do. I wanted to expand my belief system on justice to the state level. Ran in the convention with 3 other qualified individuals, won the convention, and then won the general election in November with the highest vote total in the history of the state. As Attorney General, I really took an opportunity at the platform of the Attorney General's office to expand the depth of what the Attorney General did. My 2 predecessors had been more functioning lawyerly types. We're the lawyer for the state, blah, blah, blah. We took a more aggressive role. Yes, we're the lawyer for the state, but we also created a voice to get things done. One of the first things that we did was we stood for transparency. The administration, although it was a Republican administration, had joined with the General Assembly Republicans and Democrats to tout the effectiveness of needle exchange to save lives in the opioid epidemic. I called BS. That needle exchange, a clean needle, doesn't save anybody's life from an overdose. At best, it stops you from spreading disease, hepatitis, HIV. But to go around and tell the citizenry that we've solved the problem of opioid abuse and opioid deaths by exchanging dirty needle for clean was a lie. Started a real ruckus, but those are the kinds of things that I think are important to do, to be able to speak the truth about things and then back them up. And we were able to back up our information pretty accurately. But gained a reputation for standing up and pushing back and not just following the crowd. And I think that's important, particularly today, because so much of what's going on is a matter of control, of getting someone's mind and a community's mind thinking a certain way so the government can take over and tell you what's right and tell you what's in your own best interest. And we see example after example of that. So one of the things that I'm conveying to people as I run for office is that I'm not the type to sit by idly and let the lie continue. That if I see it being misapplied, then I'll speak up. And I think that's the important aspect of bringing the authority back to the people.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, today at the State House, they handed out that form showing the voting record of the representatives and senators, and it was quite disturbing. Even some that spoke today, how their voting record is still lacking on the constitutional side. And so, of course, one of the big areas that we have concern with is constitutional leadership, leadership that upholds the Constitution. And I know that you've said that that's one of the things that you work for. We're talking about that today at the State House. So, just a couple questions on that area, really. What will you do to help secure the borders of America here in Indiana?
That's an important question, and it's an important issue because oftentimes, well, as a technical matter, immigration is a federal policy. And so states have a limitation. In fact, the Supreme Court has offered a very strong suggestion that states have no business in immigration. While I would take that position under a ordinary circumstance, the problem is that we don't have a federal response. Immigration is broken. We don't have a good policy towards legal immigration. We have people who are qualified folks who have to wait years and years and years because of a process that's broken, so that's not working. And then we have a front door that's wide open, or maybe I should say a back door that's wide open, that's seeing 200,000 people a month coming in and no way of solving that. If the feds aren't going to do something, we have to do more. I have talked about this issue in the past. As the governor of the state, I'm responsible for the National Guard, and I have no hesitation to deploy the National Guard to cooperating border states if we can work out some type of cooperative where we can assist in actual border security, putting actual boots on the ground to assist. Now, we don't just throw that out there if they don't have a plan, but if Texas has a plan, and Texas usually does, we would be happy to coordinate with Texas and other like-minded states to beef up that support and put some personnel on the ground. That's one thing. Here locally, we need to do more to put pressure on our employers for their responsibility of hiring illegals, and we need to make sure that we're not offering statewide benefits to those who shouldn't be here. I hate saying that because it puts us in a situation where we have to look at the humanitarian side of things of someone here needing assistance, and I'm hopeful that churches and community individuals can step up and fill that void. But as far as government's responsibility, government cannot stand by and just continue to let this happen. It's sort of a wink. It's we put these rules in place and we say that we're not going to provide benefits to those who are not citizens, and then we see it happen and we turn the other way, and the situation grows worse and worse and worse. A few years ago, when we had the border secure, we were in a position to actually address the immigration problem. Because once you are able to cut off the number of people that are coming in, now you have a finite number to work with, theoretically. So let's say it's 15 million. If we know that there are 15 million people here illegally, and we know nobody's coming in the front door, so we can stay with that number, now we can start to do some things. We can divide the people up into criminals and thugs and everybody else, and maybe treat them differently, maybe come up with some policy that allows us to move forward and try to end this issue once and forever. Now, with what we've had over the last 2 or 3 years, with 200,000 people a month coming in and millions of more people coming in the door, that plan is shot. There is no way currently to be able to address that current problem and fix it with some kind of a solvable solution. We can't and shouldn't wave a wand and just say everybody's legal. And we don't have the resources to go out and corral the people that are here illegally to get rid of them. So we've created a real permanent problem. I don't have the answer to that problem. I see what the problem is, but one of the answers that we do have is to put pressure on our employers to do the right thing and make sure that our state's not cooperating or facilitating the problem by providing benefits to those that we know shouldn't be here.
I appreciate those answers, because that's one of the things that I've continuously said is we would get our states to put our National Guard on the border and protect. And some people, of course, have said, well, they can't do that because the border is the federal government. But in my opinion, like you said, when the federal government's not doing anything, it's got to be our place then.
Well, and it's Texas's border. So if Texas is lining up to protect its own sovereignty, we can line up with Texas.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Uh, what will you do to bring about the abolishment of abortion in Indiana?
I think we're on the right track. As the Attorney General, my my role had been prior to the Dobbs decision was a piecemeal approach to restrictions that would ultimately lead to a situation where abortion was no longer logical. And that was actually happening. Abortion figures and numbers were going down on a regular basis because the restrictions were such that it was making it more and more difficult, and the choices were becoming easier and easier for people to go ahead and have their baby. With Dobbs, that sort of got shuffled. And what's interesting about that is it caught a lot of so-called pro-lifers off guard, because for the last, well, 50 years, a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives, a lot of so-called pro-lifers were able to say that they were pro-life and not have to prove it, because you're going against Roe's out there. That's the standard. So I can say anything I want to say, but Roe's the law. Roe's no longer the law. We get to rewrite our law. Now what? And then you saw a lot of people in that session. Yeah, we got a good result, but it was an ugly result, because a lot of people didn't want to commit because they really don't have a pro-life position, or I shouldn't say that they don't have the whole pro-life position. They are some variation of pro-life, and so we saw some of that going on. I think ultimately we have to recognize that no matter what the law is, it's a choice. It's always going to be a choice for someone to make. And so our job is to provide the rationale and the guidance so that the people who find themselves in such a way make the right choice. If we have 1,000 women who find themselves with unwanted pregnancy and 1,000 of them choose to have their baby, we won. We don't need a law. So from my perspective, what we have to do is change the minds of people to recognize the value of human life at the source level, at the pregnancy level. And that is our continuing objective.
So in that, wouldn't it be then easily said that if it's a choice for a mother to be able to take the life of a human being that's inside them, then we could have people say, well, it's a choice for me to take the life of somebody?
Don't misunderstand what I said, and maybe I said it incorrectly. I'm not saying that it's a choice legally. What I'm saying is, as a practical matter, a person who finds themselves pregnant, regardless of what the law is, makes a choice. And that choice may be to get on an airplane and go someplace else and have an abortion along those lines. So I didn't know if you did.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay,
No,
choice. Wait a minute, we hear that a lot. It's a choice.
No, it's not. That's not my point. My point is that they will do what they will do.
Okay.
And what we want to do is make sure that regardless of what their mindset is, it's not so much that we want them to do it because they have to do it. We want them to do it because it's the right thing. We want them to get the feel that this is something that I need to do.
Yes, sir.
That's ultimately how we win that battle.
Okay.
The law, even though I'm a lawman, well, it's sort of like the difference between Moses and Paul. I mean, you have the law and people, and you have to do something, but it's much better if you do it because you know it's right.
Okay. Now, in that, right now, with the current law and all, we have where there were abortion clinics are now counseling clinics to tell people where they can go outside of our state to have abortions. Is there even some legal way to be able to stop that?
I don't know if there's a way to stop the counseling. That gets into a free speech issue. I think it's a big win that we got away from the clinics. I think it's a positive that it's limited to hospitals, although we don't want to see hospitals engage in that practice, but hospitals are a lot less likely to be involved in that, at least some of the hospitals outside of some of the urban areas. So it's moving in the right direction. As far as restricting someone from an Indiana resident who wants to have an abortion, I don't see a constitutional approach to restricting a person's movement. Why someone goes to Ohio is none of my business as a state.
Yeah.
It's sad if the reason that they're going to Ohio is to have an abortion, but I don't want to get into a situation where we're trying to attempt to stop someone's movement and behavior and freedom.
Yes, sir.
We want to do it from an instructional standpoint. We want to do it from an educational standpoint, from a compassion standpoint, from a love standpoint. But at the end of the day, someone is free to go wherever they want in this country, and for whatever rationale. Our objective is to try to provide as much resource, as much assistance, as much guidance, so that they don't make that decision to freely go away. But I think it's dangerous for us to get into a situation for anybody where we start restricting behaviors and restricting movements because someone believes or wants to do something different than what we want to do.
Yes, sir. That's one of the things that I've had back and forth with friends of mine is that I believe that this, instead of the federal government getting involved, this should be a state issue, and it should be decided by the people of that state whether they're going to allow abortion or not allow abortion. And some are saying, no, we just need to make it illegal. Well, that takes away from the state right, the people. If I live in a state that the majority of the people are going to say, well, I want abortion, then I have the right to say, okay, well, you're not going to get my tax money anymore, I'm leaving.
That's it. And that's a tough position to be in, but that's if we believe in our system that's set up and our state sovereignty, that's what we're dealt with. I mean, it's sad what California and New York and some of these states are doing with regard to abortion. And what's interesting is a lot of that was unforeseen with the demise of Roe. A lot of people thought we get rid of Roe, we get rid of abortion. What actually happened is we got rid of Roe, abortion increased in many of the states because it provided an opportunity for the states to retool and actually double down on opportunity and availability of abortion. So it makes the situation, for us in Indiana, where we have the right-minded people in positions to get us where we need to be, we're in pretty good shape, but some states aren't so lucky.
On your website, you talk about trying to lower gas taxes, income tax. So the question I have on that is, why not just abolish the gas tax and the income tax? Other states have. The income tax in particular, we believe is unconstitutional. Why would we not just work to abolish those?
I think we can look at those things. I think in terms of taxes, the first step we have to do is do a comprehensive review of what we want government to be. Why do we have a tax? We have a tax because we want services. So what are the services that we need to have? And once we have identified comprehensively what government should look like, we have to determine what does it cost. Once we determine what it costs, then we can come up with a fair methodology for getting the revenue. So that's essentially what taxes are. We've looked at it from the standpoint of what types of piecemeal things can we do to provide some targeted relief that makes sense. And so from the gas tax standpoint, you're talking about a gas tax that was increased, I think 2017, 2018, it's been going up $30 million a year each year. We're simply talking about going back to 2017 levels as a first step to get 16 cents per gallon back into the pocket of Hoosiers who may be suffering right now. A targeted approach. Another approach that we had is with regard to youngsters. We have a very real problem where young people who graduate from college are not staying in Indiana. And so we're not having enough people in the workforce. We're losing a lot of brain talent. So one of the things that we talked about was, can we look at a situation where we incentivize people at a certain age to stay in Indiana, keep them living in Indiana, take away their income tax, but what we get in return is they stay, they're investing in homes, families, and workforce. So that's one of the things that we're looking for. We're looking at targeted approaches that have a specific result that makes sense. But before any of that takes place, we have to look at comprehensively what it is that we want to be. When you talk about eliminating the income tax, I pay taxes just like everybody else. I'd love to not pay an income tax, federal, state, but I also like many of the services that come along with having a tax. So if you talk about eliminating the state income tax, which is $8 billion, then the first step you have to look at is, do we have $8 billion that we're wasting right now? Or is there $8 billion, is there some way to replace that revenue? We have to determine what is it that we're going to do without. That's where a comprehensive review needs to come into play. there clearly is government waste. It's going to take some time to go through the departments and make sure that we've understood where those wastes are. Is there $8 billion worth of waste? That remains to be seen. But it has to be looked at very comprehensively. It has to be looked at, and I don't think anybody's looked at it in that sense, because what happens is, particularly Republicans go in talking about less regulation, less government, and every administration grows and grows and grows because everybody wants to do something and identify a wish list, and somebody's got to pay for it. So we've got to make some really, really hard decisions on cutting, not just spending, but cutting programming, cutting things that don't work, looking at something and saying, why did we do that? Well, we did it because of this. This doesn't exist anymore. Well, let's do away with it. That's hard to do for government because it continues to grow. But I think that's one of the steps in the right direction. Income tax is not the only problem. A lot of what I hear on the road is property tax. But property tax is at a local level. The state has a responsibility with regard to rates and setting the formulas. But then you get into what happens at the local level. That's where you're getting your local police protection and fire protection and all sorts of things that are paid for through those property taxes. It becomes a very complex situation. And yet we need to come up with solutions to that, because you've got older citizens who've done their bit, their kids are gone, so they're still paying for education, they're paying for services, and they own their house, but they don't own their house because they're paying property taxes. It's a big issue. That has to be placed within that context of what to do about the tax structure. It's all a matter of putting it all on the table and looking at what it is that we need to do, what it is that's important, and making some choices, making some hard decisions.
You see, that one of the things that I look at is that you take Florida, for instance, no income tax, and they have programs just like anybody else. But in that, like you said, we got to look at what programs. I mean, really, what is the government's job in these programs? Are they supposed to provide these programs, or is this just something where we're getting government to do something that should be really the responsibility of the people, or the responsibility of charitable organizations, things like that?
Well, you got to look at Florida. Florida's got two things that we don't have. They've got year-round sunlight, and they've got Disney World. So they have a tax. They have a tax that they put on the rest of us to go visit, a hospitality tax that is able to rake in a lot of money. So it's just not as simple as a comparison. Here in Indiana, we've talked about doing something for senior citizens, people over the age of 65 who snowbird. They moved out of Florida. What do? They change their residency. Well, what if we give them an incentive, some type of tax relief, some kind of a benefit, so that they can stay in Indiana and continue to contribute to the economy? Those are the types of things that we have to look at, but we have to recognize who we are. We have sun 5 months out of the year, so we can't compete with certain aspects of things. We don't have Disney World, and so it's got to be an apples to apples comparison to try to cut our way through this, or find ways in which we can enhance what we do have in Indiana and sell the hell out of that.
Well, in that, again, with what is, when in your comprehensive look, are we going to be looking at, like I said, what is responsibility of government? Because all of us, I would think, would agree that there's a lot of stuff that would be wasteful because it's not government responsibility.
Well, that's exactly right. The list continues to grow. It has become so easy to rely on government as, well, let's just get the government to do it. Let's get the government to do it. Take education. What's the one role that we want out of our education process? It's to teach our children. And yet, what have we become? We've going to become a place where we feed kids. Now, I don't want to talk bad about giving kids lunch, but there was a day when you went to school and you took your lunch. Yeah. Then there became a day where they said, well, not everybody can take the lunch, so we better provide some lunches. Okay, we'll provide the poor kids lunch. Then there was a day, well, let's provide everybody lunch. Then there was a day where somebody said, Johnny can't read because Johnny's not eating breakfast. So let's get Johnny breakfast. But let's get all the kids breakfast. So now you've got a situation where everybody's getting breakfast, everybody's getting a lunch, and when the budget cuts come to play, what's the last thing they're going to cut? The food program. Yeah. But what was the point of education? It was to teach our children, but it's become to feed our children. Now, what that does is that abdicates the responsibility of parents. It's not my responsibility as a community member or my responsibility as a government to feed your child at school. That's your responsibility as a parent. We've taken on the responsibility to help educate, not educate, but help educate your child. You can feed them. And if you're not feeding them, we have a response called neglect of a dependent that steps in and takes care of that situation. So we're not talking about sending kids into a situation where they're starving. We have an answer for that. It's called accountability. But these are the choices that we make. We grow things. You're hearing there's a pretty robust discussion these days on childcare, and who wants to talk bad about childcare? We want to see childcare, but the point is, whose responsibility is it to provide childcare? Childcare is very, very helpful to economic development by providing parents with an option to have someone watch their child so they can work. But from my perspective, childcare is about providing quality service to a child to make sure that there's competent people that are there, but somebody's got to pay for that. And is it government's responsibility? That's the question that we need to continue to ask. Is it government's responsibility? Government may want to do it. Government maybe can do it better, although there's not a whole lot I can think they do it better. But that's what we have to start getting away from and be very, very particular about how we do it.
You know, talking about that is kind of further down, but
I like to anticipate.
you know, you talked about the schooling and what they do. How much control should the government have over homeschooling? This, you know, we homeschool our children. I think John homeschools theirs. A lot of people are going to homeschooling because of the failure of the government institutions called schools. And it's been proven over a period of time now that homeschoolers tend to do much better on all the exams and testing. When I graduated homeschool, I was homeschooled. I went to join the Army, and I couldn't even join the Army with a homeschool diploma at the time. They wouldn't accept it. I had to go get a GED, and then they wouldn't accept that. I had to work other ways to get into the Army. But then 4 years later, I'm a recruiter. And we're being told, no, go look for homeschoolers because they're going to score high on the ASVAB and they're going to make good soldiers. And so we were looking for them. But we're seeing a lot of states having a lot of controls, trying to make homeschooling basically like the public schools, and then even making them have to, you know, register with the state and stuff. How much control do you think the government should have over homeschooling?
Well, I'm beginning to wonder how much control the government should have over public school. I mean, I certainly don't see that the federal system works. It doesn't. So we should be getting away from what I call the crack addiction of the Department of Education. By they handle out the money and then they come up with the rules. So the answer is none. We did homeschooling. My kids started out in Christian Montessori. Really cool program. I had to stop because as a public servant, it got expensive. It was like $4,500 per kid. They wanted to give me a discount for my fifth kid. I said, it's a little late. So my wife said, let's do homeschooling. And at the time, I didn't want to do it because homeschoolers are nerds, no offense. You know, I didn't want my kids being all weird and like homeschoolers are. And because I was of that mindset that a lot of people were, was that there's something weird about homeschooling. Best decision that we made was we did homeschooling for a year. I was able to see the value. My wife, who was a school teacher, my wife was able to teach our children in 2.5 to 3 hours a day in what it would have taken 6 or 7 hours to do. And then 11:30, they go to the park, they go to the zoo, they're doing family stuff. I mean, it was a great experience. The only reason that we stopped is that she wanted to test them with the public schools high ability program. They all qualified, so we made the decision to put them in the high ability program, and it was a great decision. But I became a believer in the homeschool model because we actually went through it. It's not necessarily for everybody because I think you have to have committed parents who know how to do it. Not every parent should be homeschooling, but that's a decision that parents and children make. Some kids get a raw deal because they may not have the best parent teaching them, but that's still a personal decision. So from my standpoint, standardization and testing has screwed up public education, and it shouldn't be screwing up private education. The marketplace will demonstrate the success of the program. So from my perspective, I think homeschooling is a healthy alternative that needs to be promoted and competitive with regard to public education. But as I'll dovetail into public education, not every kid has school choice. Not every kid has an opportunity to homeschool and has parents to do that. So we do have to do more. I'd like to be able to say that the state of Indiana is going to take a hands-off approach to education to kind of let it go. Can't do that because it's so screwed up. Kids can't read. If kids could read, if we had things going in the right direction, we could say, let's let education kind of do itself and we'll stay out of it. We've got to dig in. We got to dig in with curriculum choices. We need to start teaching history, real history, factual, hard-hitting history, and not from textbooks that have sanitized history, but from actual biographies, autobiographies, from source literature, information that provides a true and accurate history, warts and all, of what America and world affairs has been about. We need to certainly literacy, reading is fundamental, but it's beyond that. We need to have civics from small grades, teaching children how government works, why government works. We have unleashed, no offense to my guys down there in their age range, but we've unleashed generations of kids who are stupid, who don't have information, fundamental knowledge about how things work. And it's continuing on. We've got to put a stop to it. How do we put a stop to it? Get rid of the standardized testing, testing somebody for some reading level and then not worrying about what they actually know, what they've actually learned. What about getting back to classic Greek and Latin? The root words for most of our language, well, for our language, Greek and Latin. What's wrong with having first graders take a foreign language and then have them take a second foreign language by the fourth grade and start preparing them for a world economy? So by focusing on really substantive educational opportunities, we don't have to screw around with CRT and SEL. Those are distractions. When somebody says, I'm going to fix the education system by getting rid of CRT, that's all crap. I don't care about CRT if I've taught a kid how to critically think. If a child knows how to discern, if a child knows how to analyze what's coming at him, it doesn't matter what someone tries to indoctrinate them with. Our focus needs to be to make sure that these kids are provided a knowledge-based system of how to analyze a process and move forward in their lives. And that's whether it's homeschool, that's whether it's public education, that's what we need to be promoting.
I'm going to ask one more question. I was just told we had about 10 minutes and I didn't realize we had that kind of time limit. And I just want to be able to let they have a question real quick. But this is a question actually from Ben Purcell, who was not able to be here. But he wanted to ask you, should, can, will we put the 10 Commandments in public buildings, such as State House, schools?
I'd like to. Yeah, I think the question is, can we do it without getting any kind of a lawsuit? I mean, that's really the question. These days, you get lawsuits for those types of things. I think we certainly should, because it is a basis of who we are. There is is it Iowa, I think, that just had a satanic statue or something in their place. And you get into the, well, you got to let everybody do it kind of a thing. I think it's right to be bold, but we have to face the fact that under our current situation, if we take that type of action, we're inviting lawsuits because of the way the legal system has sort of flowed with the culture. I think that we had that battle back in Elkhart County. I think most counties have had that battle where they put the 10 Commandments up and then someone's come and protested and filed a lawsuit and sort of chased the 10 Commandments out of the building. But I think we'd be much better off to do it, probably a stronger basis rather than having the symbolic commandments posted is, are we in a position to be able to teach and or support the commandments and the philosophy of faith openly? I think we should be able to. Certainly those who opt not to are able to openly opt not to. And it should be fine for kids and teachers and coaches and all to pray publicly. I think it would be not only appropriate, it would be advantageous to our existence.
Sir, someone have any questions? All right. Well, I had a lot of other questions, but we don't have time. Maybe next time we can get this together.
You want one more? Are you good?
We can do one more? All right. So when it comes to the state's right of nullification, how would you see yourself using it to defend Indiana from federal overreach?
I haven't focused on nullification. As Attorney General, we dealt with overreach on quite an extensive basis. I mean, the federal government has its place. State government, state sovereignty has its place. We have to. Our system was set up to allow for both. I like an orderly process. There's a thin line between nullification and rebellion, and we need to be able to have a sustenance of law and order, but also an ability to protest and have civil disobedience. And those are balanced things that need to exist because that's a part of what our founding is all about. Our ability to adequately protest, gather, communicate our concerns, but also we have an orderly society where we have a structure that's in place and a process that we follow in terms of not leading to anarchy and chaos. So as in most things, it's a bit of a balance. We have to be concerned about when we don't like something and wanting to nullify it as compared to when somebody else doesn't want something and wanting to nullify something that we want. The Second Amendment, for example. Most of us here probably are Second Amendment, what we would say we're pro-Second Amendment, which we interpret as pro-gun, constitutional carry, whatnot. Some of our friends on the other side of the issue who are not into carrying guns will cite the same Second Amendment as their authority. That their interpretation of the Second Amendment is that we don't have the authority to carry a gun at all times. So there's always that balance of interpretation of what I want to always look at is a way in which we can be fair-minded to everyone, not with regard to what I believe, but what the standard ought to be, so that we have a fair process to air our grievances and to have a just result as best we can.
What I mean by the nullification is, in fact, there's been some states recently using it to basically when the federal government will not listen to us, and when we're saying, no, this is a state position, this is a state's right, this is not in your area of authority, and yet they want to push that. Would you see it as a tool in the handbag per se, to be able to say we've gone through the steps to try to make it right, to get you to see that this is not your place, this is our place, therefore we're nullifying your authority in this in the state. You can't come in and do it.
You can push that level, and the concern I have is that when you where does it end? Because the federal government can take a position, the state can say no, you can't. Ultimately, it's going to end up in a courtroom or in armed conflict. I mean, and so I'm hopeful that we can always resolve our differences between the federal government and the state government without resorting to an armed conflict. It certainly seems less and less likely that will be the result. 10 years ago, I might not have said that, but I think we're seeing levels of acrimony and discord that are leading us to a more rebellious nature. For example, if some of these states or courts are successful in keeping Donald Trump off the ballot in 2024, regardless of how you feel about Donald Trump, if they're successful in keeping him off the ballot and therefore not allowing voters to have their right at the poll, you're going to see some dangerous times ahead. You're going to see people who will not accept an election result. And when that happens, we've started to unfurl the fabric of who we are as a constitutional nation. It doesn't matter who started it, doesn't matter who was wrong, we're in trouble. And so from my perspective, I always want to try to move towards a resolution that that has a constitutional basis and a justice basis, a lawful basis, and one that will allow us to stay together even if we have severe differences. And that's getting more and more difficult.
Yes, sir. Yeah, because that's, when you just think about, again, it's the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And so when it says here's federal government's area, everything else is to the state government, and yet they continually engage on that. And yet it seems like we're doing little to nothing to hinder that encroachment.
We're not doing enough to impede that process, and that's on us as a people. That's the apathy that exists on how we vote or don't vote, how we get engaged or how we don't get engaged. That's why it's important to actually get folks in the pulpit directing their flock as to the importance of engaging in the political process. That's one of the things that I've been working on with some folks. We have a network of black pastors in a couple of different states that I've worked with, because we see the value of conservatives in that community that are holding back, and we're trying to encourage them to step up and get into the pulpit and lead people to a point of view that they typically believe but don't support from a voting standpoint, because we do believe that there's basically a binary option out there, the right and the left, and the distinctions are getting very, very clear. And we want to be able to have the people who are like-minded all on the same page, so that we can assert much of what you're speaking about now.
Sure. Sure. Well, I certainly appreciate you being willing to come out today and talk with us. And I'm going to get with your folks and see about setting something up where we can get more people from the community.
That'd be fantastic.
Meet you. I think it's important to get people involved by getting them to meet the people and hear from them personally. We just don't see enough of that, I don't believe.
I couldn't agree more. I think that what we have today is people who run for office. It's become a rich man's game. You got money, you got create a commercial and create an image and paint a picture of who you are. And that's what people see, and that's what people vote for. And then they get disappointed because they don't have the result that they were after, because they basically voted for a fraud. And so I think you got to sit down with somebody when you can and eyeball them out.
Yes, sir.
So I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Shut this off.